Hello and welcome to another edition of The Tigers Down Under. I'm your host, as always, Alex, and with me for this episode I have Dan. How are you, Dan?
Yeah, I'm not too bad. I'm not too bad, actually.
Yeah, we've had a week off. A few things conspired to not have an episode last week, so the anger's probably dulled a little bit in regards to the Swindon game. And in the meantime, we've had two victories in the cups, which we'll get to and we will cover. But we'll obviously start with that league performance against Swindon. So it's a little while ago now, a bit over a week ago, that we lost to Swindon Town. And I guess, painting the picture going into that game, we'd sort of talked on the podcast the previous week that, yes, these sorts of games can be potential banana skins, but against a side that had lost five in a row, I believe they only had four players on the bench or five players on the bench thanks to COVID. They actually didn't have a manager in their training sessions during the week thanks to COVID. So, of course, scene was set for a typical City performance where we slipped to a 2-1 defeat. I guess starting with the positives, try and be a little bit positive on the game. Lewis Potter with a fantastic goal in the first half. How did you see that and the performance leading up to the slip, I guess?
Look, that is probably just about the last thing I remember from the game. Part of that was due to consumption of alcohol. Part of that was due to the horrendous time of night that we're forced to watch these games.
Yeah, you and me both. But, it was actually not quite my wedding anniversary, but we'd been out for that weekend celebrating. So consumption of alcohol is a good a good issue to have for that game. Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I was very excited. It was a great run from Lewis Potter to just did it all himself. Really got it and ran and just had an opportunity and slotted it really nicely, especially from outside the box to get just inside that post. And I think it was just a typical sort of Keen Lewis Potter. We've seen that so frequently already this season. The driving runs that has the defenders on the back foot. So that was really pleasing to see again. It's nice to see him get on the score sheet. I think already it's been got awarded goal of the month with 70% or something, 75% of the votes or something ridiculous. So that was good. I think we didn't actually start too terribly. I don't think we looked okay. We looked lively. We got a goal, and then I don't know what happened after that. It obviously all fell apart.
all a blur from there. Yeah. Look, from my perspective, as you say, that Lewis Potter goal was just sensational, and the fact that they just kept sitting off him, he just kept kind of going, oh, all right, I'll just keep going, and just slotted it. So the signs were good really early, and as you say, we were causing them a lot of problems, putting a lot of pressure on, and just couldn't convert our chances. And the longer that happens in games, it always seems to be the way that the side that just can't convert their chances are made to suffer. And sure enough, it was essentially their first chance. And you say that one of the last things you remember is the Lewis Potter goal. So I don't know how much you remembered or seen of the equaliser from Swindon, but for all the praise for Lewis Potter, I do think he was essentially at fault for the equaliser, where it was a little bit naive, not just of him, but of the entire side, that time and time again, it was clearly a tactic of theirs to take the free kicks, take the set pieces really quickly to sort of try and at least capture some of that momentum and push us onto the back foot. And so sure enough, I don't know if it was actually their first corner, it was one of their first corners. They take a quick corner into the box, City players asleep. Lewis Potter essentially turns his back on the corner. It was probably the main culprit. And of course, they then score from it. So, for all the praise for him, to be fair as well, to be a bit even and balanced, it was also probably his fault for the equaliser.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunate, but I guess that just goes to show. He is only, was he 19 or 20 or something? So, I guess that's goes to show that some of those things that he's still got to learn, and with a young squad again, I guess overall, things to learn from and improve on that. He can't afford to switch off in those games regardless of the opponent. I think we saw that against Fleetwood previously, where we had an off day and they capitalised. The positive is that, which we'll obviously talk about later, but that obviously got rectified on the weekend in the FA Cup. But yeah, I think just we really, you got to take that loss to Swindon as a learning curve in both making sure that we capitalise on the chances that we create and putting those in the net, but also on maintaining that defensive awareness and that mentality for the whole 90 minutes.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting that you touch on that previous Fleetwood game, because I guess looking at this game overall, not just we can look at the goal in the second half that we conceded as well. That was probably just a poor defensive error from, I think it was Burke, who sort of charged out and misjudged the ball. But just looking at the result overall, does it sort of concern you that, yes, we lost to Fleetwood and we bounced back and we had a couple of wins. We lost to Peterborough, we bounced back and we had a win. We've now lost again. We've obviously bounced back in the Cups. Maybe we'll also bounce back in the league against Burton. But it's a little bit of concern starting to creep in that, for every step that we take forward, we seem to be taking a step back. And it just seems like, yes, the Fleetwood loss was in a way probably a good loss to have to sort of keep the squad grounded, but we don't need to keep having those sorts of losses. The team needs to start to learn and build and push on from that and stop having these sorts of slip-ups.
Yeah, look, that's certainly an argument that can be made. I don't know. Like, when you look at the table and you look how everything's still unfolding, I guess, obviously it would be better if we weren't throwing away or giving away some of these games and dropping these points. But I think we're a game in hand and we're 4 points behind first or something. So overall, we're still in a really strong position. I guess the concern going forward, and is what you were touching on, is if we can't rectify and we keep going game for game and going win, loss, win, loss, win, loss, that gap's only gonna grow, and there needs to come a point where we do, can start stringing those strong positive results together again, so that we can consolidate that position and keep growing that gap between those playoff and promotion spots and the rest of the chasing pack. I think we have enough talent to do that. And I think, I guess one thing I would say is that what last year or last season, it seemed that McCann wasn't really learning from the mistakes that he was making, and it seemed that we were tactically making the same mistakes, over and over and over. And even, you go home and away against one team and you could play the same way and make the same mistakes against that particular team and that particular style twice in a row. But again, I guess using that Fleetwood as an example, it seems obviously there were some things that conspired in that game on the weekend to benefit us, but there was signs that we had learned from that 4-1 loss in respect to that one opponent. Yeah. So I guess looking forward for the rest of the season, I'm hoping that some of these early couple of losses, so Fleetwood and Swindon, that these will be, that we will actually be able to use them as platforms for growing and learning, and that, come the reverse fixture, that we'll be able to demonstrate that and put in a really strong performance and walk away with 3 points. And if that happens, then I'm not too concerned by some of these individual losses. I do recognize that right now the current lot of form overall is not great. In that last 5, was it two or 3 losses, I guess, in the last 5 or 6?
I think it's 2 in the last 5, but yeah, the Fleetwood loss was just before that.
So, which is not great overall. But again, I think when you put it in context of the position that we're still find ourselves in, we're still in a really strong position moving forward, and we still have the opportunity to consolidate that moving forward and stay in that position. So I'm hoping that, I guess it's me being a bit of a positivist,
which we try to do on here. We try to be a bit positive. Yeah.
But yeah, look, I really don't feel like it's alarm bells. Not like, there were certainly times last season where it was really clear that everything was falling apart.
Yeah,
it's not a, we haven't gone 7 goals down in the first half or anything crazy like that. It was a
look. If that's our barometer, though, I don't think we're. But it's an easy bar to clear, I think. But no, look, and it's a fair point. I think for me, it's just the concern about the teams that we're losing to. I think if we were losing, the Peterborough loss to me was a very easy loss to swallow, even though in a similar fashion we went up a goal early and then lost the game. I think that loss is easier to swallow because of the strength of the side we faced, and even looking at Fleetwood, they're a reasonable side. They're sort of mid-table. It was the fact that Swindon were on a 5-game losing run and were pretty smashed by COVID injuries or absences, I guess, if you'd call them that. That was sort of the main concern for me, and almost these defensive lapses that we were seeing in the championship. Obviously, not punishing us as much at this level, but the fact that we sort of can't get our head around what needs to be done defensively in games is quite frustrating. But I take your point that it's still quite early in the season, and there's a lot that can still happen. I guess it's always, I always find it tough to give a 3 MVP votes in a game that is as frustrating as this one. But I mean, I guess I'd give the 3 to Lewis Potter, given the fact that he did score, and as you say, goal of the month. So hard to go past him for that one. And then I'm just going 2 of the central midfielders in Honeyman and Doherty for the 2 and the 1. I can't really see any votes for a defender in this game. I think actually, as a final observation on the game, I don't know about you, but to me, looking at the game in the first half in particular, I thought Emmanuel looked quite tired and quite leggy. I don't know if that's kind of just his style and his running gait, perhaps, but I'm a little concerned at the number of games he's playing. I think the break midweek last week was really well timed for him, and then obviously hasn't played this morning either. So that one was probably a bit of a concern for me, but yeah, I'll probably just give the votes to a couple of the midfielders.
Yeah, look, without having seen too much of the game, it's hard to have a strong opinion on this. I can't argue with you really one way or the other. But one thing I was just thinking as like a final point is carrying on from, you mentioned some of the defensive issues, and I just back to the point I was making about McCann actually learning from some of his mistakes. I think we've seen with Device even this year, he's not been a lock into that position, and so McCann's already showing that he's not afraid to make those changes, and it is obviously at this level is maybe a little bit more forgiving for some of those younger guys like Jacob Greaves or whatever to come into the squad. So I think if Burke perhaps continues to make some of those same mistakes, then I would hope that McCann will be willing to take him out for a match or so, and even if that means Device has done enough to get himself back in, or whether it's one of the others, Alfie Jones slots back in there or something, but that someone else will go in and get the opportunity to do the right to have a go.
Or McLaughlin as well, who had a fantastic game this morning. So we'll talk about those cup games now, and as you say, we did get that chance to have revenge on Fleetwood. I was a bit surprised at how full strength we went. I mean, I guess from the position of always assuming that we'll go weaker in the cup, but when you consider that we didn't play midweek against Accrington Stanley, this cup game was essentially in place of a weekend fixture. We had Long in goal, was probably the main change from what you would consider a full strength side, and then I guess we had Jones in midfield and Greaves at centre back. But otherwise reasonably full strength. And, it was a great first goal from Magennis. It's the sort of goal that I wouldn't have necessarily thought he had in his locker. Really sort of deft touch with his outstretched boot. And then Burke getting his first goal for the club was pretty notable as well.
Yeah, look, I think that Magennis goal was really nice. We're finally one of those strikers is starting to show a bit of that predatory instinct in the box. It's flicked off Wilkes' head and he's thrown his foot at it and been able to knock it in across goal back at the far post. There was another one in the second half that he almost was able to get his foot on again, and it was only, I think the keeper was at the near post and dived out. It got past him, and Magennis was sort of just only a bloody half a foot off or something, and he would have had a tap in if he'd got a toe to it. So he's there or thereabouts. He's showing to be quite impressive this season, which is really nice. Burke, it was good to see him get a first goal for the club. I think it's been quite a while between drinks in general. I guess he's been with us for, is that 18 months?
He was on my Adkins, so that would have been from the what's that, the 18-19 season.
Yeah, so a couple of years. So that's at least 2 years essentially without a goal. And then I don't know, they mentioned it in the call, something about it was since he played West Ham versus Shrewsbury in a cup game or
Oh, right.
something, quite a long time ago. So, and it might have even been I don't even know if it was senior or what, but
Yeah.
a while since he scored a goal. So I think he'd been so long he'd forgotten how to celebrate it. He just sort of
Yeah.
just wandered around, went for a bit of a clap down the sideline. But no, it was good to see, and I mean he's come close a few times, so it was nice to see him finally get one.
Definitely. And we've drawn Stevenage away in the second round, which in a way is sort of a disappointing fixture because it would have been a ground tick for a lot of, for every City supporter. We've never played them in their history. So with no crowds allowed into the games, it must be quite frustrating for a lot of our UK listeners and watchers over there who otherwise would have been at the game for a new ground tick for watching City. So a bit bittersweet in that sense. But it puts us in a really good position to win that game and get into the third round where you suddenly have most of the Premier League and Championship clubs.
Yeah, look, cup run's a cup run. It can work for us. It could go against us. Who knows? But I'm happy to be a part of it while it's alive.
Yeah, and I'm almost wondering if this year cup runs have that extra importance and significance for lower league clubs where there are no supporters in grounds, and cup run gives you that extra bit of income that you've otherwise lost through no supporters in the ground. So genuinely, this year more than most, I think clubs will be trying to actually get through the cup to get a bit of extra income.
Yeah, I guess that's so angle I hadn't considered, but I guess the other thing is we've already seen how congested our fixtures list
Yeah,
is.
that's true.
The flip side of that is every time you advance in the cup, you squeeze an extra game into your calendar. And you know, if the game against Accrington hadn't been postponed, we'd have basically been like Saturday or like weekend midweek for a month or something.
Yeah,
like
that was a very welcome postponement.
Just an insane amount of fixtures, particularly for so early in the season when we're still players are still getting to full fitness. So,
and when you consider the fact the season started late, you're almost saying all of this overdrive in fixtures is just to get back to normality in terms of presumably by Christmas they'll have played X number of games and it'll be roughly aligned with the number of games they would have played for last season. It's just in a much more congested period of time. And then even normality in lower leagues is still pretty congested because you're mostly playing midweek games whenever there's a Champions League night. You've got your EFL Trophy, which essentially is an under-23s cup at this stage. And so that postponement came at a very welcome time. It's going to be interesting to see how the other clubs in League One who haven't had that break potentially suffer for it, or potentially it's just a case that they've had to rotate more than we did in the FA Cup and the EFL Trophy.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. That's for sure.
And so then, of course, speaking of the EFL Trophy, we did play Harrogate Town this morning in that. Much more changed side than the FA Cup game. Callum Jones getting the armband, which was pretty nice to see. He's not necessarily gone under the radar, but he's another one that's sort of stepping up in that next rung of players behind Lewis Potter, behind Bowen as the next sort of big star out of the academy. So great to see him get a start and get the armband this morning. It shows that McCann's got a decent level of confidence in him. And then Ahmed Salam came on late as well to make his City debut, which was also great to see. So a couple of kids getting their chances in the side, and Jones got his first goal from the penalty spot late in the game to wrap it up after Scott got us away, I think about 70 minutes in.
Yeah, look, again, I wasn't able to watch this one. I was marking assignments and getting ready for work and all sorts of fun things. Yeah. So, but I was keeping an eye on the score as I went along, and an eye on the stats. And I mean, I don't know. I'm not sure how it played out on television, but just from the viewing the stats as I went along, it seemed like we weren't as dominant as I probably would have expected us to be. It seemed like we didn't have majority possession according to the stats. We did have the majority of chances, but
it's bizarre. I don't think we've necessarily had the majority of possession in any game this season, and there've been games that I've watched where I felt we were quite dominant, and then I look at the stats and it does tell a different story, which is quite strange.
Yeah, and I guess, and on top of that, like we end up 20 shots, but only
Mm,
7 on target or something, and that's
mm.
something that we were talking about with that Swindon game, and being able to actually, when we have those chances and we're shooting, we need to actually make sure that they're on target, that we can capitalize on those chances that are being created. So I guess that was probably a frustrating part, but again, it's hard to really gauge that without having seen the match. But I think it was nice to see James Scott get a goal. He's had a horrendous time as a City player. I don't
Yeah.
think like the only player that I could probably count
Snodgrass?
as unluckier than um, that's unluckier. Maybe Snodgrass. I was thinking Mason because of
Yeah,
like
that's
how
true. Yeah, yeah.
how innocuous that all was, and then how severe and serious that the implications that came out of that were. But to step on a sprinkler or whatever in your very first training session for the club, and be out for such an extended period of time and then come back in. And then this season it was something similar again. He
Mm.
was the
And
first game
he'd never been injured
yeah.
before he joined us, I
Yeah, so
think, as well. So it's not like he's injury prone. Yeah.
no, it's just a bit of bad luck, but got a goal, which is good. Bit of confidence for him moving forward. He'll start, I think, now that he's fit and apparently firing, start pushing some of those players for more game time. So that'll be good. And I guess as you mentioned with Callum Jones, that's really nice to see another young lad step up in the first team, get the armband, get a goal. I mean, what else can you ask for?
No, definitely. Look, I mean, I can't disagree with what you're saying in terms of not taking our chances. It did feel like a matter of when, not if, we were going to score. But that was more from the point of view of, we were having those shots, and even though they weren't on target, they were reasonably good chances. I know Eves and Scott, before he even scored, did both have quite good chances where I think Scott almost rounded the keeper to slot it in, and the keeper just got to it. I think Meyer or Adelican had a reasonable chance as well. Though I did think Meyer had a reasonably poor game, which surprised me to an extent. He seems to be a player who he's one of those ones where it's almost as if he's the start of his career with us was so good, and so almost because it was such a surprise at how good it was. And he's almost like regressing to a mean now. Like he's sort of coming back to what he, maybe he's full of adrenaline when he debuted for us, and now he's sort of settled in. It's actually sort of caused him to drop off a bit. But look, I thought Jones was great. Great for him to get a goal. And yeah, great. And I mentioned before, McLaughlin, I thought, had a tremendous game. I think he made, I don't know, half a dozen or a dozen blocks to sort of stop Harrogate chances, which was fantastic. So we sort of talk about this fixture congestion, but the more chances it gives these younger guys to play, it's almost, I think back to the season we got relegated under Bruce, where we were out of the Europa League so early and we built such a big squad. And then we suddenly had all these players who couldn't play games because we just didn't have any competitions for them to play in, where you're not giving them runs to keep them fit and keep them, sort of match fit and in form. And B, you're sort of, getting players' noses out of joint because they're sitting on the bench or sitting in the stands the whole time. And even though it's, it's just an EFL Trophy game, to be able to give Meyer and Adelican and others starts, and Jones from Southampton, whose first name I always forget because I keep thinking of Alfie Jones. There you go. Guys like McLaughlin and stuff, guys like that who otherwise wouldn't be getting much of a look in. It's still kind of keeping them involved, and it's kind of, and it's giving McGann a good look at who's in form. So now on the weekend, if he sort of looks at the team and says, Device maybe he's out of form a little bit, or Burke's looking a bit shaky, suddenly he's got McLaughlin who's actually knocking the door down. It's not just a potential what if, speculative pick. Yeah, he's actually got the form on the park.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. Which when we're just talking about whether the cup games are a boon or a curse, there's another consideration in how they can be of benefit for the team and the squad as a whole. So, don't know. It's interesting. I think we put ourselves in a good position. I think if we get a point against Grimsby next Wednesday morning, I think it is, then we're in the top 2, and I think that's what goes through to the next round. I can't remember exactly how it works.
And
Something
it's
like
also
that.
it's a weird setup as well, because even if it's a draw and we get a point, it then goes to penalties. So there's a chance that you still get 2 points out of the game if you win the shootout, and we seem to
Okay.
have a reasonable. Yeah, it's a very Mickey Mouse, literal
Yeah.
competition. So what is it, Papa John's sponsorship
Yeah.
now? So it's we're going to take home the pizza trophy. So very, very,
Well,
it is what it
better
is.
than a toilet bowl here in Australia.
And you know what? Look, if it's a trip to Wembley and a bit of silverware, then it's a bit of silverware. It's a bit of fun at the end of the day. So we'll move on to the player who we're focusing on this week, and it just so happens I set this all up last week, expecting to be doing an episode last week. So this was definitely not influenced by this morning's results, but it just so happens that the player we were going to look at is James Scott, who got the first goal this morning. So. Look, he signed a 3.5-year deal back in January. Pretty highly rated from the move down from Scotland. Scored reasonably early in his City career against Birmingham. As you touched on, he did have the really unfortunate injury that initially was going to keep him out of the season. And then COVID, there was a few of our players who were quite fortunate in a way with COVID that it sort of reinvigorated their seasons. So he got another chance and looked pretty lively in his first few games for us. He's had a few other issues since then, so he's been in and out of the side. But the goal this morning makes it 2 goals for him in a City shirt, and he might be sort of back in the picture for a start in the league.
Yeah, look, I know when he signed, we were I think he was one that caught us off guard a little bit, but when we had a bit of a look at him and saw what he could do, I think we were pretty excited about the potential. He was another nice young striker who had been scoring some goals. So I think, as we sort of touched on before, it's just been unfortunate that he's taken so long to be able to get started. But hopefully from now, with a couple of goals to his name, a goal this morning, that it's only onward and upward from here. Look, I guess it's going to be the jury's still sort of out for me. It's going to be a time will tell now. He just sort of hasn't really played enough games on whether he's been a success or another or he ends up being a mediocre sort of signing for us. But I think there's plenty of good signs. I think he's nice and lively on the park, and he always really tries to be involved. And he's got some nice footwork and some of those some things that count in his favour. So I'm really looking forward to seeing how, I guess, just his story progresses over the rest of this season and how much game time he gets and whether he can, force his way in. Because in front of him he's got Ken Lewis-Potter on one side, Malik Wilkes on the other. It's a pretty potent sort of wing spots, and I guess Magennis and Eves as well, who are both scoring in the league. So pretty potent front three to try and break into. But I think he's certainly got the skills and the ability to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And look, another one from this morning who played quite well, who we hadn't mentioned, was Martin Samuelson, who I thought arguably had his best game in the City shirt, but frustratingly seems to go missing against higher level opponents. So he's another one who's sort of in and out of the side a bit frustratingly. But as you say, if Scott can now sort of take that step up, I sort of look back on that goal that he scored against Birmingham, where he seemed to really kickstart his career with us quite early on. And he seems in that similar. I think we essentially signed him as a replacement for Bowen, and he's that similar sort of nuggety, smaller winger, where if he can get going for us, he could be a really good player. But you're quite right in sort of saying he's sort of jury's still out on him at this stage, and it sort of just depends on how he can, get a bit of a run together of games in the side and start to string a few goals together to get not only his confidence up, but his form up and really sort of cement that place. Because, theoretically, Eves and Magennis, that FA Cup goal, notwithstanding for Magennis, haven't really cemented a spot in our forward line. So if Scott was able to step up, there is a position there open for him. If Wilkes was to go central as a number 9 and to have Scott and Lewis-Potter on both sides, there's certainly a spot there for the taking if he can step up a little bit more.
Yeah, I think that'll make as I sort of said, it's going to be an interesting dynamic, and to see how this all unfolds. And I guess it's really on Scott to keep pushing and to taking those opportunities that he's given, and see what happens from there. But
Definitely. Well, we'll look ahead now to a clash against Burton Albion. And we were saying before the episode, it's quite exciting that we're finally playing a side that we probably have a little bit more recent memory of. They were our bunnies back up in the championship where we beat them 4-1 at home and then 5-0 away. So a 9-1 aggregate scoreline in our only two ever league meetings with them. That home fixture, of course, was especially notable because of the fact that Jackson Irvine basically sold himself to City in that game by scoring a worldie of a goal and then getting himself sent off. So, which was almost as exciting as any game that he played at the KCOM in his time with us. I don't think he ever got sent off for us in a game. So, it was an interesting one. They're struggling in League One at the moment with no wins in their last 5, which makes this game hopefully another game that we can look to win. And I guess the other notable point is, of course, former City player Stephen Quinn is in their midfield. So we had Paul McShane a couple of weeks ago, and now we get to have a reunion with another fiery Irish former City man.
Yeah, I think when you were mentioning that game against Burton that Irvine scored against us, and I just remembered that was the weird period of time where Slutsky just about went and bought everyone who scored against us.
Yeah.
if you scored against City, you got a contract with us. It was a weird little moment, weird little month there. But look, I think I don't know. There was some crazy games. Two high scoring affairs that we played against them last time. I mean, hopefully we can replicate that in our favour again. But yeah, I don't know. I guess probably the best thing that came out of that 4-1 was that we ended up signing Irvine, and he turned out to be, I thought, a dependable asset that we had for quite a while. But
definitely.
Look, I think again, as I seem to say every week, it'll be a tough game in League One. And if we don't take our chances, we'll find ourselves probably on the wrong end again. I'm optimistic and I'm positive about our chances and about the players that we have at our disposal at the moment. So I think I can't see any reason why we won't be able to go out, put on a strong performance, and come home comfortable victors. But again, you only have to look back to last weekend to see that anything can happen.
Another interesting point as well is that they're managed by Jack Buxton, who is technically a player manager, but he's sort of a player manager in the Nick Barmby role, which is, he's a player manager in name only. Really, he's essentially retired. I don't think he's played a game for them this season, so it's a little bit of a quirk. You don't see player managers too often these days, so that'll of course be interesting as well. I tend to sort of agree. I think it's the sort of game that we should be winning. I think. You do have to look at the fact, though, that Burton did get a 2-2 draw with Peterborough in their last 5. So it's not as if they're just being belted by all the good teams. They've got 3 draws in their last 5. So they're a little bit resilient defensively. So need to take our chances. I think after the cup games, I think it's given McCann a good selection headache to have. I think across the 2 games, there's been a pretty reasonable display from a number of players who could come into the side. I think it's great that Emmanuel now has had 2 midweek rests, no game against Accrington, and then the rest against Harrogate as well. I think he probably needed that. So it's great that he'll presumably slot back in. I think Coyle must be reasonably close to a return to fitness, but probably not quite there. I wouldn't be against starting either of Greaves or McLaughlin at centre back in this game. I think they've both put their hands up, and I think to an extent you do need to reward those performances and give those players a bit of consistency in game time. I think up forward, like I was sort of saying, I don't necessarily think Eves or Magennis has really stuck their hand up to get the run out.
Away? Is there something international?
Oh, actually, no, it's a good point. Yep, he's away with Northern Ireland anyway.
Yeah,
he can't. Yeah, so I think he misses our next 3 games actually. So that probably makes it even easier to say that perhaps Wilkes should start up forward with Scott and Lewis Potter on either side of him.
I mean, without Magennis there, it's whether McCann thinks that Eves has done enough to earn that start. But yeah, I think Wilkes going through the middle with Scott out wide is certainly a very strong option.
Definitely. So other than that, we've also got the game that we've sort of touched on already against Grimsby Town midweek. It's probably as local a derby as you're going to get for City, if unless we're playing a North Ferriby or someone. I guess notable for the fact that they've got Ian Holloway as their manager, who's probably a little bit of a celebrity signing for them, essentially. Previous manager of Blackpool all the way up in the Premier League as well. So he's got a bit of pedigree about him. They did lose to Leicester's under-21s this morning 3-1. So not in red-hot form. But yeah, it'll be an interesting clash against a local rival. And I am pleased to sort of note, I suspected it was the case, but it does look like all these EFL Trophy games are on iFollow, which is great. I was at one point assuming that all these cups wouldn't be included, but good to say that this is included in the subscription.
Oh, beautiful! Didn't even realize that. I'll be able to watch along next Wednesday then.
Yeah, I sort of signed in hopefully, and it was there.
Yeah, right. I saw something that it was available to international viewers, but it seemed the thing I saw seemed to indicate that I was going to have to pay like for a one-off subscription to it, and so I just didn't even bother. I had too much to do anyway. So but yeah, look, it'd be a good opportunity to see some more players. Get more game time. And as we sort of said, if you can get a win or a draw or whatever, we should be able to go through and carry on. I don't know.
Carry on our way to Wembley. Absolutely. No, that will be good. Hopefully we can pick up a couple of wins in this 7-day period. But until then, thank you for joining me tonight, Dan.
That's all right.
And thank you everyone for listening in. We released, I think it was last Sunday, the first episode in our decade flashback from the 2010s, which was a great episode to record with Brad. So if you haven't had a listen to it yet, I encourage everyone to tune in and have a listen to that. We'll be recording the second episode in probably this weekend or in the coming weekends, which will go out first to our Patreons and then to everyone else a week later. So, if you haven't signed up for the Patreon, really encourage it. It's great for the support for us. It gives us a little bit of means to get these podcasts out to more people in more ways. And you'll get great stuff like those podcasts a bit earlier than everyone else, which is always a good benefit. So other than that, if everyone listening wants to like the video, leave a comment, perhaps any memories or thoughts on James Scott, any thoughts on the loss to Swindon, and share the podcast around, that's always appreciated as well. But until next time, come on, City.